Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so glad to see so many people here today. Thank you to CPAC for inviting me and the Independent Women's Forum back here again this year. It's always such an honor to be on this stage. And I am thrilled to be talking with you about what is conservatism. Well, in contrast to the narrow-minded, uniform, somewhat out-of-date caricature of conservatives so often portrayed by popular culture and in the media, the conservative movement, as you just heard, is actually rather broad. It ranges from social conservatives to free market purists. It's a movement made up of men and women of different races and ethnicities. We're comprised of people from red states and blue states, from every industry and every walk of life. In fact, the conservative movement is expansive enough to encompass libertarians. I know I'm not supposed to say that libertarians are conservatives. I've seen people get in trouble for that before, but I don't want to confuse the media, too much subtlety. So, of course, with people of so many different backgrounds and ideas, it might be hard to see us as a unified movement. But as my former boss, my first boss here in Washington, Ambassador Jeane Kirkpatrick, famously quipped, "Look, I don't even agree with myself at times." The bottom line is that the conservative movement is a big tent. So I guess that's the question we're here to talk about. If we are so diverse, perhaps that does beg the question, what holds us all together? How is it that so many people who don't necessarily share the same experiences and don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything come together as a political movement? Well, if you look at the broad outlines of the right and the left, I think one extremely important common thread is our commitment to a shared set of ideas or principles, and to the notion that principles trump identity, no pun intended. In fact, it was this commitment to ideas that initially attracted me to this movement and to so many of its great thinkers. We believe deeply in the universal principles of constitutionally limited government, free markets, human dignity, and equality under the law, so that each of us can pursue our own lives of happiness, whatever that may look like. Of course, as the head of a conservative women's group, I'm frequently met with the question, if conservatism is about universal principles, why do we need a women's organization? Don't women and men care about the same issues? Well, of course they do. Let me see a show of hands of all the women in the audience who think it's important that we develop a more dynamic and competitive healthcare market. A lot of you. How about all the men? There's a lot of you. Men and women might care about the same range of issues, but not always in the same way. And they don't always see it from the same perspective. They each bring their own experiences to the table and their own set of concerns and considerations, and that matters. Physical characteristics, cultural identities, these can help shape our experiences and influence the way we conceive of the world. Some of you may have heard recently Republican South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. He gave some very personal and very moving remarks recently on the Senate floor, remarks about his experience as an African-American man. He recounted the times as a United States Senator that he had been pulled over for no obvious reason. He had been stopped on Capitol Hill, even while wearing his congressional pin. And as he put it, I simply ask you this, recognize that just because you do not feel the pain or the anguish of another does not mean it does not exist. Steve Rhodes at the University of Virginia, among many others, has argued that certain sex differences are hardwired into our biology. That shouldn't be such a shocking idea. As a woman, I have the great honor and the blessing of being a mother. I have one of my people here today. I've conceived and carried and given birth to children. That's a powerful experience that I share with a lot of the women in this audience today, but not the men. Bottom line is our identities matter, and it would be crazy to ignore these differences in politics. But here's the thing. While most of us understand and appreciate that boys and girls, men and women are different, we also believe that our physical and cultural identities are only part of the story. Recognizing these differences between us, these broad categories and groups that we are a part of, doesn't mean conservatives have to accept the left's identity politics. Because far too often, the left's policy prescriptions are identity politics at their worst. the game of rewarding and punishing specific groups of Americans because of their identity. And conservatives rightly loathe this kind of politics and policy making. The big difference between conservatives and progressives is that conservatives, like those of us at the Independent Women's Forum and you here in this room, believe the differences between us are real and significant, but we don't think that they're determinative, and we don't believe that the government should treat them as if they are. And here's what I think is interesting. There's a lot of leading academics out there who agree with me. Our commitment to ideas is in fact what defines the Republican Party as a vehicle for the broader conservative movement. Some of you may be familiar with a new book out there. It's called Asymmetric Politics. The authors, Matt Gross from Michigan State University and David Hopkins of Boston College, they make a pretty bold argument. They write that most Democrats during the 2016 election chose between Clinton and Sanders because of group identity, not ideology. They claim that in the end, instead of building her campaign around a single ideological theme, Clinton offered an array of policy proposals designed to appeal to a variety of specific constituencies. This is radically different from how the Republican Party functions, and the authors acknowledge that. Republicans, they write, have organized their own party to advance an ideological cause defined by a set of common values. They stress Democrats tend to explain their views by citing the social groups. Republicans link specific issues to general beliefs about the proper role of government. And I promise these are their words, not mine. The conservative movement is not perfect, but Margaret Thatcher reminded us that you have to fight a battle more than once to win it. And I often find myself urging the right to really recognize and appreciate our diversity, something I know CPAC has worked hard to do, especially under this current leadership. I've tried to explain many times to my fellow conservatives that thinking about and talking to women as a broader group who often have many shared experiences and perspectives in common isn't the same thing as pandering or playing gender politics. Our identities, whatever they may be, can have a profound impact on our behavior, our different roles in society, and our interests. And these variations mean we have a distinct way of considering the world. Experimental psychologist Steven Pinker perhaps put it best in his book, The Blank Slate. Equality is not the empirical claim that all groups of humans are interchangeable. It's the moral principles that individuals should not be judged or constrained by the average properties of their group. I think this is a defining and differentiating characteristic of the modern conservative movement that distinguishes all of us, diverse though our ideological flavors may be, from modern liberals and progressives. So to wrap things up, here are some of my identities, some of the broad groups that I belong to. I'm a Jewish woman, I'm an urbanite, I'm a wife and a working mother. I'm also a brunette. I don't know, is that an identity group? But I'm also a conservative who believes deeply in the idea of limited government, liberty, and equality under the law. So I'm very different from many of you, but we share a common commitment to principles that unite us as conservatives, and ultimately, that is what this movement is all about.
Thank you, Sabrina Schaeffer.